All right, are we ready to get started? All right, thank you. So good afternoon. I would like to welcome everyone and thank you for attending part one of the PHRC Portraits and Pride celebration. My name is Jenny Stallnaker. My pronouns are she, her. I'm an investigator in the Pittsburgh Regional Office, and I will be your MC for today. This presentation is being recorded and live streamed on Facebook. Please remember to stay muted and use the chat function for any questions. We have several exciting speakers lined up for today, so let's get started. I'll turn it over to Zulai for opening remarks.
Thank you, Jenny. Welcome everyone streaming online on Facebook, and also our beloved community here at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. I'm speaking to you on behalf of our esteemed executive director, who just so happens to be celebrating his nuptials this weekend. So I just want to welcome everyone. And I just wanted to highlight what he would in terms of our beloved community and what we do here at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commissions, where we value each other. You know, and one of the values we uphold here at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission is equality, right? We believe strongly in equality and dignity for all individuals. And we uphold these principles, you know, of justice and fairness to all through the work that we do, through our conduct, and through our communication, which is one of the many reasons we highlight important discussions such as these. So I'd like to welcome everyone. I'm really excited for what our presenters are going to be teaching us today. And yes, I hope everyone enjoys. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Zulai, and thank you for agreeing to do this last minute. With that, I will turn it over to Adam.
Hi, everyone. So Ian Faunestock has been an employee with the PA Human Relations Commission's Central Office Enforcement Division for 8 years, starting as a clerical assistant, and then in 2017 as a clerical assistant 3 to present day. This is the 4th year aiding in the planning of the PHRC's Pride events. Besides serving as a chair for the PHRC's LGBTQ plus community, Ian serves as a member of the PHRC's Diversity and Equity Committee, the School to Prison Pipeline Committee, the Rapid Racial Response Committee, and the AFSSCME Local 1420 President. Ian is also a graduate of the Martin Luther King Jr. Leadership Institute, class of 2019. He is the recipient of an Executive Director Excellence Award in 2021, as well as a Central Office Employee of the Year Award in 2021. So without further ado, here's Ian.
Thanks, Adam. And thank you, Zulai, once again for jumping in last minute to speak on behalf of our executive director. I'm grateful to him for allowing us to form this committee and provide these spaces for us to put on these events. As Adam said, I've been active participant in them over the past 4 years, and I've gotten to meet and hear incredible people and stories on all levels, from your politicians to your activists to just normal people like us. Thank you, Chad, wherever you are, and congratulations on your marriage. Before we present our speakers, though, I just want to take a moment to thank the committee. We have about 14 members, and when we started, we were presented with a large task of having 3 events throughout the month of June to celebrate Pride Month, one put on especially by each region. So this month, we're being presented by the Pittsburgh Regional Office. So thank you, Pittsburgh Regional staff, for pulling this all together. You've done an amazing job coming up with wonderful ideas and reaching out to the awesome people we'll be presenting here momentarily. I had the pleasure of joining our Pittsburgh crew this past Saturday at Pittsburgh Pride, where I got to march alongside them in the Pride Parade for the first time and help them operate an information table for PHRC for festival goers. It was a truly awesome experience, and I can't wait to do it with them again next year. And today we have the Central Outreach medical bus out front of the Pittsburgh Regional Office that will be providing information for sexual wellness. Just a whole bunch of fun stuff going on today and in the coming weeks, as we have 2 more events after this for our staff. Thank you all for that. I got so excited when I was told that we have Emily Kinkead, Representative Emily Kinkead and Sebastian Garetto to join us today, especially with the potential for our own PHRC advocate for dealing with these, for dealing with English as a second language in our own commissioner, Dr. Raquel Yanks, who's a champion for that, and our colleagues with the Governor's Commission on Latino Affairs who've been invited also to join us here today. I hope they're out there in the crowd and hopefully drum up some good conversation afterwards. As well as being a little biased, as my partner, who's Puerto Rican, has also struggled with the challenges of navigating English as a second language. So with that, I'll be going back to moderating behind the scenes now. So thank you, Adam, once again for the introduction, and on with the show.
Thank you, Ian. It was really great having you and Jessica here in Pittsburgh, and I am looking forward to next year as well. Our next speaker represents Pennsylvania's 20th Legislative District. Before entering public service, she tackled some of our society's toughest problems, including disability rights, immigration, and criminal justice reform, and provided legal aid to vulnerable individuals facing eviction. Deeply dedicated to addressing disparities in the law, she also co-chairs a program that aids to end bias in the legal profession. With that, I'm proud to introduce my friend, State Representative Emily Kinkead.
Thank you. Really excited to be here and to be talking about, the kind of issues that we're seeing at the state regarding LGBTQIA+ issues. And prior to this, we often see a lot of legislation and aren't necessarily, encyclopedias in terms of how much of what the legislation is. So I did have our research office pull. There are 19 bills in the House, 1 resolution, and 4 proposed bills that are still in the co-sponsorship memo level related to LGBTQIA+ policies. I guess, thankfully, if you will, only one of those bills is anti-LGBT. There are 24 bills that are in the Senate. There's 2 Senate resolutions and 3 co-sponsorship memos. And again, only one of those bills is anti-LGBT. Both bills are the anti-trans bills that we have seen moving to that ostensibly protect women's sports by denying trans girls the ability to participate in sports that reflect their gender identity. I voted against that bill when it came up on the floor of the House and spoke out against it because, as we all know, when you deny somebody the ability to participate fully and authentically as themselves in an organization or a sport, that it further increases the stigmatization of them. It increases rates of suicide and depression and anxiety, which are already skyrocketing among particularly trans youth, but LGBTQIA+ youth across the board. So I'm vehemently opposed to that. But what I am excited about is the fact that we have a lot of legislation that exists right now that's seeking to do better, that's seeking to actually fix some of the issues. And what we were able to do this week in session, we actually voted on a bill and passed it through the House. It's headed to the Senate that would remove all references to homosexuality from the crimes code, which is a little crazy that in 2022 we still have references to homosexuality as a part of our crimes code, but we are thankfully and hopefully it passed unanimously. So I'm hopeful that it will pass the Senate and get sent to the governor so that we will actually have made that progress. There's a number of pieces of legislation that seek to end discrimination in the various forms against people with or members of the community, from a blanket ban or blanket protections for LGBTQIA plus folks. That's Representative Frankel's Fairness Act. I always get it confused in my head with the Equality Act, which is the same thing, but that's at the federal level. So Representative Frankel has been introducing that legislation for about 20 years now. And progressively, we are getting more and more co-sponsors. We're getting more and more attention for it. And so unfortunately, we still haven't been able to pass it, but it's getting a lot more traction year over year, which is good. Senator Lindsey Williams and a number of our Senate colleagues introduced a package of bills that would make it easier for our transgender friends and neighbors to legally change their names and make it less costly, streamline the process, and make it less burdensome, because there are a lot of really onerous issues with name changes right now. It's also very expensive to legally change your name. And so there's a real need to do that. The other aspect of this that we're still kind of grappling with, how exactly do you address it, is that people with criminal records are not allowed to change their legal name because unless they're getting married, but they're not allowed to legally change their name. And it was largely, sort of an artifact of a time where we couldn't really keep track of people if they had different names. Now, we have the technology that makes it pretty easy to, have a criminal record follow somebody even if they have a different name. So that's, one aspect of things, but the other aspect of things is a question of how long does a criminal record, how long really should a criminal record follow somebody? So, we're still grappling with that and how exactly to address that issue. We also have a bill that would ban what's the so-called gay panic defense, which is still a thing that you can use in Pennsylvania to justify assaulting a member of the LGBTQIA plus community, and that you didn't realize that they were gay or that they were trans, and when you realized it, you were so overcome with panic that you attacked them. And it's a justification that we still accept in our Pennsylvania courts right now in the criminal justice system, and it's something that we absolutely need to change. So there's a number of bills that we're finally recognizing that these are things that really need to address. A lot of them are about discrimination, and it's discrimination, in terms of credit, in terms of healthcare, and a lot of things that I don't necessarily think that we all immediately think of. I think a lot of us talk about, discrimination in employment, discrimination in housing, but the ability to be awarded credit is something that if you're trying to buy a house, that we want to make sure that folks are protected in that capacity. So I will not list off every bill. I don't think that anybody is really interested in hearing about every individual bill, but what I am excited about is that we are finally having conversations about all of the different and very nuanced ways that members of the LGBTQIA+ community experience discrimination, and the fact that, you know, we are still to a degree legislating that. We have all of these bills that are helping or ostensibly are trying to help our community, but they aren't moving. What we are seeing moving are anti-trans bills that are just facially discriminatory and have no hope of actually, you know, helping girls' sports, women's sports, because we're also not, you know, fully funding Title IX. So at the same time that we're pretending to protect women's sports, we're not actually doing the things that'll actually help to bolster women's sports. So, you know, I'm trying not to be a Debbie Downer about the fact that, you know, this isn't, we're not getting the things done that we want to get done, but we are having the conversations that we need to be having so that we are ready to go at a point where, you know, potentially the Democrats take the majority. And I always sound like a partisan hack. I try very hard not to, you know, not to talk about like Democrats versus Republicans in places like this. But the reality is that by and large, the bills that are pro-LGBTQIA+ are sponsored by Democrats and they're not moving. And the anti-LGBTQIA+ bills are sponsored by Republicans and they are moving. And the way to change that is to flip the majority. And so if we are, you know, if we're honest with ourselves, we're not going to necessarily see a lot of movement on these unless we are actually giving folks an incentive to do that. And that is with a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate. And so, yeah, I will, I'll kind of leave it there. I will open it up for, you know, whatever you guys would like, but I think we're doing questions at the end. So I will turn it back over to our hosts.
All right. Thank you, Representative Kinkead, for your leadership on the floor of the State House and for your support of LGBTQ+ Pennsylvanians. Does anyone have any questions for State Rep Emily Kinkead?
Feel free to put in the chat or just come off mute.
So I have a question. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask, have you seen any partnership with your partners from the Republican Party? Have you had any that have decided to cross the aisle and support bills?
So we have Todd Stevens is one. It was actually his bill that we voted on to remove references to homosexuality from the Crimes Code. But it actually was initially Representative Zabel out of Delaware County. It was initially his bill. He's a Democrat. So basically what the Republicans tend to do is when they want to actually move a Democratic bill, what they do is they take it and they reintroduce it as a Republican bill and then they move it. So there are certainly some allies, but you know, they're not vocal enough to actually really champion a lot of stuff. The pro LGBTQIA+ bills that are in the House are by and large introduced by Democrats. There's a bill that Wendy Thomas has that would require the Department of Human Services and any provider of services under the department to provide services without discrimination based on not just gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, but also, you know, race, color, familial status. So it's broad. So Wendy Thomas, there's a I'm looking to see in my list. So that's the only one right now pending that has been sponsored by a Republican in the House. And there's a couple in the Senate. and basically they're like companion bills to some of the stuff in the House. So Pat Brown, who's actually the Republican chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, has a companion bill to one of our bills in the House. But by and large, we're not seeing really like any champions of the issue. They pretty much they'll vote on it, but they won't necessarily champion it. One thing that I will say that was kind of interesting and maybe like a positive takeaway from this really egregious anti-trans bill that we passed in the House was, you know, there's a lot of conversation about if you're adopting the language of the opposition, that you're basically giving sort of the opposition a win, if you will. And you know, if you're, you know, in the same way that we try to reframe, you know, pro-choice, anti-abortion kind of conversations, if you're adopting the language of your opponent, you sort of are giving them an advantage. What I will say is that all of the conversation on both sides of the aisle for this anti-trans bill or against it absolutely adopted trans-inclusive language. So it was an interesting thing to hear people advocating for this anti-trans bill while at the same time using very like intentionally respectful language to trans individuals, in terms of, you know, referring to like born male or you know, biological male. And what I think that really indicates, despite the fact that we lost the vote on the floor, what that indicates is a real shift in perception across the board of trans individuals. And that is actually something that maybe we didn't win on this time, but the mentality of a lot of the of the conversations is changing to be trans inclusive. And so as we're moving along, you know, we are, you know, just the same way as our language changed around, you know, around Black Americans. If our language is changing around trans individuals, if our language is changing around LGBTQIA+ individuals to be more inclusive, I think that also moves the marker on actually getting positive trans inclusive, LGBTQIA+ inclusive policies passed through the legislature. For Stacy, sexual orientation isn't covered as a hate crime because we can't get that bill passed, is fundamentally it. We have legislation that would include, you know, sexual orientation and gender identity and expression as a part of the, within the hate crimes, but Republicans just aren't moving the legislation on it. Crimes motivated by sexual orientation, is there a push to change that in PA? There is. We have legislation to try and push it in you know, the sense of, one, banning the gay panic defense, and two, including it in the hate crimes code. But it just hasn't moved to this point.
All right, if that's all the questions we have, thanks again to State Representative Emily Kinkead, and I will turn it over to Jessica.
Hello. Before we welcome our second guest speaker, I wanted to let everyone know that the PHRC will be providing additional trainings just for our staff concerning trans topics and pronoun usage. These trainings will take place virtually in the months leading up to National Coming Out Day in October. And now, allow me to introduce our next speaker. Sebastian Garetto is the Casa San Jose Human Resources and Operations Manager. Sebastian is an alumnus of the Community College of Allegheny County with an AS in Sciences focused on psychology, sociology, and information technology. He is also a member of the Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society and the Psi Beta National Honor Society in psychology. His areas of expertise are system migration, implementation, and administration. Sebastian is from Argentina, having moved to Pittsburgh in 2005. He volunteered at the Gay and Lesbian Community Center of Pittsburgh, now the Pittsburgh Equality Center, and has helped with the implementation of the library system at the Jim Fisher Keller Library. Sebastian is a passionate advocate for human rights, diversity in the workplace, public education, and global equality. He is humbled and honored to be part of the Casa San Jose family and to have the opportunity to showcase his skills and experience for the benefit of the Latin community at large. Welcome, Sebastian.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. It was awesome. First of all, I would like to thank Jenny and the audience for allowing me to take part in this presentation. So thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. Secondly, you need to know that I'm not too used to public speaking. So if it gets a little bit out of control or it gets a little bit awkward, just feel free to stop me, ask me again to go back and repeat the same information that I'm going through. I recognize that sometimes because of my inexperience about public speaking and because of my accent, it might be a little bit difficult, but I think I'll be able to manage, I hope. So I need to share with you a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to use. So let me see if I can. All right. Okay, let's see. Right. So is everybody able to see the screen? Yes? Yes, okay. So the topic that I'm going to be talking about is about Latinx and why the use of the term Latinx is problematic, okay? So I believe that most of you have heard, or probably some of you have heard about this term in use and what it implies, and probably some of you might be aware about what's the problem with it. So I'm going to go about information that I gather online and through a study through the Pew Research Center published in 2020 about Latinx. And I'm going to go over that information and trying to arrive to some conclusions about why this term is perceived as being problematic for the Hispanic Latino community here in the US. So let me see. So I'm going to open up by retelling something that happened to me recently. Actually, last year I was a facilitator for a focus group study sponsored by the PA Department of Human Services on issues facing the Hispanic community here in Pittsburgh. The very one that I was part of, in which I was being a facilitator, consisted on about roughly 12 participants that identified themselves as Latino or Hispanic, belonging to the LGBTQ plus community. And they were of diverse ages, socioeconomic status, and backgrounds. From all that group, and along the way, we could discern that there were about 3 groups that were very distinctive from each other. So, pretty much one group was composed of Latino immigrants from Central and South America that were very limited in their English. Basically, they didn't speak any English. Everything was in Spanish. And another group was of immigrants that have been living in the United States for more than 10 years. And a third group was composed by the youth with ages ranging from 15 to 18 years old. Pretty much all of them were either second generation or first generation born in the US. From all the group, 4 of them were college educated, and at least 1 or 2 were graduated or graduated professionals, and the rest were considered working class. From all of them, at least 2 of them were born in the US, and there were either first or second generation Latino who identified themselves as members of the community. However, Spanish wasn't their first language, and the use of Spanish was very limited. One identified herself as transgender using she, her pronouns, and one was non-binary gender queer using they, them pronouns. So this is just to give you an idea how heterogeneous this group was, and that all that heterogeneity, sorry, to conduct this focus group created a number of issues. Like, for instance, things got heated up at the very beginning over deciding in which language to moderate the focus group. Having some people like pushing for it to be in Spanish only, some other people that didn't care, and other people, mostly the younger ones, that they were unable to understand Spanish and they prefer for it to be in English. So at the end, I had to conduct the focus group in both languages, which took like a long time. And during the time in which we were conducting the focus group and we were having the questions brought up to the participants, some of them started to object about someone else using the Latinx term to identify themselves, and that opened up to a number of discussions and arguments about it while we were discussing topics like inclusion and the lack of mental health services for the LGBTQ+ Latino community here in Pittsburgh. So as the arguments on Latinx started going onward, there was some objection to the use of the term and explaining that it was wrong to use it as an inclusionary term. And then the discussion about Latinx went over topics such as colonization, politics, the generational divide, the proper use of the language imperialism, something that I wasn't really that tuned up with, race and identity. And at the very end, about this specific topic, there was no agreement, and we had to all agree to disagree. Now, myself, I was very surprised about the heated discussion, because it wasn't until that moment that I realized that I was unaware of the issues around Latinx. Like, because it's not a term that I ever used to refer to myself, or to refer to my community, or to refer to my people, my heritage, my background, or my culture or ethnicity. I always use the term Latinos or Hispanic or Latin American. And pretty much it is because these are the terms that I understand. These are the terms that I grew up with, so it's something that I've been primed with. Now I'm old, I'm in my 40s, and I came to age during the 90s, okay? So the way that I understood being gay and Latino is pretty much primed by my experience growing up in Argentina during that time. And I mean that it's not that I was completely unaware about the term and what it tries to convey. And I also would see it in advertising, in some articles, some readings, publication, etc. And honestly, Latinx seemed completely logical to me. To me, Latinx was, or is, a term with the added gender-neutral X suffix instead of either the masculine Latino or the feminine Latina, to denote inclusivity of the Hispanic LGBTQ+ spectrum. And to me, honestly, it was like the English version for Latine. And Latine is instead of the X is using the E, which has become more popular in my country to refer to exactly the same thing. So to me, Latine and Latinx, it was just the same thing, only in different language, and not such a big issue about it. And Latinx is not something that I certainly use in my vocabulary, not because I had issues with it. Simply, it's not a term that I was having people around me using a lot. I still will see it in invitations for an event or in publications still, but it wasn't something that I would use myself or I would see being used around myself or within Casa San Jose. So the question varies, what's the problem with it? Okay, so let's start with the definition. Latinx has been included in the Merriam-Webster dictionary in 2018 and is defined as of, related to, or marked by Latin American heritage, used as a gender-neutral alternative to Latino or Latina. Then also Latinx is a term used to describe people who are of or relate to Latin American origin or descent. It is a gender-neutral, non-binary alternative to Latino or Latina, sorry. After that heated discussion during that focus group, I continued to asking myself, why, what is the problem with it? And I Googled as much as I could about it. And I came to understand in depth why Latinx as an inclusive genderless term is poorly accepted among the Latino Hispanic population in the United States. So to provide some historical context about the term, let's say that during the course of the last 50 years in the United States, a variety of pan-ethnic labels have come to characterize Americans who can trace their ancestry back to Latin America and Spain. And after Mexican Americans and other Hispanic groups pushed the federal government to gather statistic information on the population in the 70s, the word Hispanic was first used in the United States in a full census in 1980. Then in the 90s, it seems that overall, Latin Americans and people of Latino heritage in the US didn't like the word Hispanic because it implied a strong connection to Spain, which is true. So instead, the word Latino came to be used instead of Hispanic and became more popular. So we go from Latino to Hispanic. And then we see that both Hispanic and Latino were started using interchangeably. And Latino was added to the US Census for the first time in the year 2000, along with Hispanic. And I still see pretty much the use of the Hispanic, Latino, or one or the other by organizations collecting demographic information, or sometimes just the Latino, or sometimes just some variances. Like for instance, I run into Caucasian Latino or Afro-American Latino. So I have to remark that Latinx is a newer term and it has clearly evolved as an alternative to Hispanic and Latino in recent years. However, according to statistics, the first noticeable increase in internet search volume occurred in 2016 when the shooting that occurred at a Pulse nightclub in Orlando. It seems that by then, many became aware of the term and after that horrible shooting. In the years thereafter, celebrities, politicians, grassroots movements have increasingly used it in social media publications, articles, advertising, etc. And also certain academic centers and community schools, public universities, and Ivy League institutions are starting replacing the title of previous Latino programs with Latinx focused ones. So this is roughly an historical context of the Hispanic, Latino, and Latinx terms in the United States. As I said before, they are all meant to be used as pan-ethnic terms to denote inclusivity. But the question is Latinx actually an inclusive term? I think that at this point, it's worth considering that I have to introduce statistics and numbers to provide some answers. So I'm going to move to a Pew Research Center study published in the year 2000 assessing the word Latinx and the reception that it has in the Latino community in the United States. This study, by the way, is a study that's been heavily quoted and referenced in many articles and readings that I get through in regard to the Latinx, the use of the Latinx term for the Latino community. And you will see that as I move through the information in granular detail, the same message about what is problematic with Latinx keeps coming over and over again and repeating itself. So let's start with this chart here. Okay, so what is this chart telling me? So this chart is telling me that from the adult population who identifies as Latino or Hispanic in the US, either foreign born, US born, second, third, or higher generation, only the 3% uses the term Latinx. It's in as much as 20%, including that 3% that have heard of that is using Latinx, and the 70% of the total population survey have not even heard of the term. So I'm going to emphasize that the emergence of Latinx is quite recent, and it was added to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary in 2018. And its emergence coincided with the global movement to introduce gender-neutral norms, nouns, and pronouns into languages whose grammar has traditionally used male and female. Then to me, it's not surprising that statistically speaking, adults are the most likely to be unaware or reluctant to use the term to describe themselves because they are like a different generation. Let's move to the next one. So in here we have two charts. I'm going to start talking about the one in the left. And from this chart here, we notice that the Hispanic youth in the US, ages 18 to 29, are the most likely to have heard the term, and 42%, and not that, sorry, start again. Sorry, let me see. Okay, from this chart here, we notice that Hispanic youth in the US, ages 18 to 29, are the most likely to have heard the term, which are at a 42%. And only 7% actually uses it. Now, you also notice here that there is a sharp decline in people who have heard the term from the ages 18 to 29 to the ages of 30 to 49, which is going down by almost about 23%, from 42% to 19%. And from this population, it seems that women are the most likely to have heard the term and used it more in comparison with men, which is down to a 1%. Why women? I really don't know. I couldn't find anything to answer this question for me, but I will try to get to it later, okay? In this chart also, we see that college graduates are the most likely to have heard the term in the whole high school and college education bracket, which is rising up to 38%. And from this group, on average, 4% uses the term. US-born young adults Hispanics are the most likely to have heard the term as opposed to foreign-born ones. And from these populations, those who are bilingual or English dominant are the most likely to have heard the term. And finally, those who are Democrat or lean Democrat are the most likely to have heard the term Latinx. So the use of Latinx is still unpopular for this group, despite having heard it more than adults, the chart that I explained before. So what is this analysis telling me? What is this analysis telling you? To me, it's telling me that Hispanic college graduates who are US born, who are either bilingual or English speaker, and who are Democrat or lean Democrat or a liberal, are the most likely to have heard the term Latinx and still use it, but not that much. Okay. Now, in the chart that we have on the right, we notice here that only a third have said that Latinx should be used to describe the Latino Hispanic population, and that is like about 1 out of 3. And that overall, the preferred pan-ethnic term is Hispanic for those who have either heard or not heard about Latinx. Now, Hispanic is defined as related to Spain or to Spanish-speaking countries, especially those in Latin America, or a Spanish-speaking person living in the US, especially one of Latin American descent. One might argue that, according to this definition, Hispanic is still not inclusive enough. It is telling me that people that is Hispanic and people of Latin America that speak Spanish. But that literally excludes everybody who is from Brazil, from French Guiana, from Guadeloupe, Haiti, Martinique, Saint Blasphemy, etc., etc. All those places, they don't speak Spanish, but they're still Latino. So, I mean, it's clearly, Hispanic is clearly still, even if it is more still accepted as a definition, as a pan-ethnic definition, is still not without its critique. Okay, so maybe these topics in particular, which is a little bit off from what I'm explaining, is worth a little bit more research. But I'm using this just to illustrate that Hispanic as an inclusive term is still fluid, and Latino as an inclusive term is still fluid as well. And according to this survey, the incidence of those who use Latinx is higher for those who have heard the term at a 10%, which again are mostly college educated, young adults born in the United States who speak English and lean Democrat. So you see the pattern here already? Okay, I'm gonna move to the next, this one. So this one is about when from the population where was asked an open-ended question about what Latinx means in their own words. 42% of those who have heard the term described it as a gender neutral one. And I quote a participant, a 22-year-old woman, that described it as Latinx is a more inclusive term to use for those who do not choose to identify with a binary gender term. And then the term Latino and Latina is very limited to certain people. From all these participants, about 12% seems to disagree or dislike the term. And I quote, "It is a ridiculous postman thought that doesn't really work with a Romance language wherein nouns are gender. It is also supposed to be an all-inclusive term for people of Latin American roots, regardless of gender," said a man in his 50s. Now, a woman in her 50s as well said that it is a gender-neutral term used out of consideration for those in the trans community. It is not a term that is likely to be embraced by the general Latino community, which is true. This term was developed by a small subgroup that is not representative of the larger Latino community, and I find the use of it presumptuous and annoying. So I wonder what will be the small subgroup that is not representative of the larger Latino community. Might it be the Hispanic college educated young adults that are born in the US who speak mostly English and lean Democrat. About 9% said Latinx is an LGBTQ plus inclusive term, as in, and I quote, "Latinx is anyone who has Latin or Hispanic heritage, including anyone who is gender fluid, gay, lesbian, or transgender." Overall, I feel that these numbers will be higher and more complete. The answers to these questions will be more complete if this study would have focused only on Hispanic and Latino population that identifies LGBTQ+. Now, on the chart on the left, we see who uses Latinx. Well, as I said before, just about 1 in 4 Latino participants are aware of the term. Again, only 3% uses it. Unsurprisingly, younger adults uses it the most. The majority are second generation US born, they speak English or are bilinguals in Spanish. The majority tend to be college educated, identify themselves as Democrats or lean Democrats or are liberals. The majority are in the US Northeast and the majority are women. Now, this added granular information about the majority being in the Northeast is curious because I think the Northeast is where most of the IB colleges are located. And this is not talking about the greater concentration of Latino and Hispanic population that is concentrated down in the South or in the West Coast. And about that, if you see here on the chart on the right, from all survey, women are the most likely to use it than men. Women at a 5% over men that only uses a 1%. And it is used the most by women that are considered young adults between the ages of 18 to 29. Now, I couldn't find anything in the web to answer to this question explicitly. And probably will be also a great thesis for research. However, I theorize that women might be more receptive to this term because the unfortunate stereotype that perpetuates about the Latino culture, which is because of the language and because of the culture, it's like heavily gender and binary. And I think that it has to do with the way in which the Latino men and the Latino women are perceived by the greater population. And it's not something that it happens only in the United States. It happens all in Latin America. It's cultural. So I think that it's interesting to see that women might be more receptive to this term, because I think that women that are college educated and women that are young adults might be more receptive to the term because they don't feel intimidated by it as much as men would do. But this is only my idea. Okay, so I don't really know exactly why this information, this poll, give us that the term Latinx seems to be highly used by female, Hispanic female college educated in between 18 and 29. Now, to sum things up, Latinx is a term used to describe people who are of or relate to Latin American origin or descent. It is a gender neutral or a non-binary alternative to Latino and Latina. And according to the Pew Research Center study of 2020 that I just referenced, Latinx is used by young adults who are mostly US born, speak English, are college educated, and are liberal. Then, is Latinx inclusive? What do you think? To me, the fact that the term is mostly relegated to US-born, English-speaking, college-educated, liberal Hispanics is precisely what it makes it problematic. It is perceived as being anglicized and whitewashed, and not representative and inclusive of all Latin American culture, history, and Latin American experience. Now, for many Hispanics who reject the term, they find that Latinx is an imposition, something imposed by white progressive activists, a white progressive activist elite that although they have the best intentions with its purpose of inclusion, they seem disconnected. They seem disconnected about it. They seem disconnected by anglicizing the term. Now, to make it simple, basically, the irony of Latinx is that it is supposed to be inclusive, but erases the crucial part of the Latin American identity and language and replaces it with a word that only makes sense in the English language. It is felt as a form of colonialism and linguistic imperialism. Now, as we saw, as I explained before, the United States has historically had difficulty trying to classify persons who are of Latin American heritage. And the term Latinx is simply the most recent illustration of this problem. Over the past decade, it has gained popularity, and it's now being used by politicians, universities, and corporations that are eager to express their understanding of the new term. But Latinx doesn't work as an ethnic label because mainly it's not embraced by the community it describes. So the problem with Latinx had to do with the term linguistic nuances that defines the basic rules of Spanish pronunciation. To native Spanish speakers, Latinx feel foreign and imposed. Now, conversation about gender inclusivity in Latin America have already been happening long before the introduction of Latinx. Activists in my country, in Argentina, have offered the Latine, which I mentioned before, as a non-anglicized gender-neutral term that actually works in Spanish. Although this very same term is still fiercely opposed by the Royal Spanish Academy, which is the institution that has its mission to assure the stability of the Spanish language. But I believe that it's important that our society moves towards gender inclusivity. But clearly, imposing an unwanted label on another community that is not receptive to it makes the effort problematic. And that's my conclusion. Now, but I don't want to close this conversation on that note. I want to come full circle and say that despite all the bad rap that Latinx is facing, and that Latinx is still a flawed effort for gender inclusivity that is still a worthy effort. At the end of the day, I think that it's also a personal decision whether to use it or not and in which context, and it's important to be aware of what using it might imply to others. Now, going back to me, I'm a college-educated bilingual Latina immigrant who identifies himself as gay man. I use he or him pronouns, and I'm in my 40s. Before knowing more about the issue of Latinx, I was completely indifferent towards it. However, I'm not jumping over someone who is using Latinx because I feel that despite all its problems, it's still an effort that is worth considering, because it foments an ongoing conversation that brings visibility to a cause, which is, this cause is inclusivity and acceptance. And that's what really matters, or I think is something that really should matter. Now, I came to Asia during the 90s, as I said before, in Argentina. And back then I already came out to my family and friends and went through all that painful process of coming out and accepting who I am and what I want. However, still during the 90s, during that time in Argentina, it never occurred to me that I would live in a world in which it's possible to be legally married to the person I love, that the LGBTQ plus community will gain global attention and visibility, that being queer wasn't something marginalized, and that it's possible to be out of work without suffering the consequences. I grew up accepting that I'm gay, but I always felt that this acceptance came with a condition. I felt that being gay was conditioned by the way that we had to modify my behavior according to the situation to be accepted. So if I will go to work, I will try to be not too gay, just keep it to myself. It didn't matter if someone knew at work, just the fact was that I didn't feel that I could express myself the way I wanted. Okay, that's the condition. The same way, if I will go out to bars, I will keep it to myself. If I had a boyfriend, I have to be careful when I introduce my boyfriend more as a friend in some instances. So yes, I grew up accepting that I'm gay, but it was a type of conditioning that I was dealing through. And I think that's sad. Nowadays, we live in a world in which it's possible to be who you want to be without conditions, that you can love, work, and live, and be transparent. Back then, I never imagined that there were even more colors to the rainbow to be added. And I feel this is wonderful. I feel that it's wonderful that we are living in a time in which all these conversations about gender equality, inclusivity, respect, tolerance, and acceptance are open and ongoing. Of course, there will be issues to deal with, like Latinx. It's not a perfect term, but it's an attempt to understand, to promote inclusivity, the same that is the word Hispanic. They are not perfect attempts, but they are attempts in which, there are these situations in which we will have to agree to disagree, see the larger picture, and be okay with it, and probably do the best that we can do. Finally, the fact that we can currently have this conversation and discussions about inclusivity during these exciting times, that I have the possibility to talk to you, to an audience, about myself without fear, I think is a step forward. And that's precisely what matters here. So I leave you with this concept for you to process, make your own opinions, and I wish everybody happy Pride Month, everybody, and thank you. Sorry for my pronunciation.
Wow, thank you, Sebastian. That was amazing. I wanted to acknowledge the fact that Sebastian is currently on vacation and is presenting to us today from out of the country. So I really definitely appreciate your presence here. So I'll open the floor up now to any questions that anyone has for Sebastian.
Hi, Sebastian. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us. And I just wanted to say your accent is perfect. We have someone we work with here, Taiwan, whose accent is even thicker than yours, and she does a marvelous job. So I wanted to ask you, tell us a little bit about Casa San Jose and what is it that you do at that organization and what is their mission?
I see. What is our mission? Is that a question?
Their mission, yes. What do you do at Casa San Jose?
Well, in Casa San Jose, we are a nonprofit organization that offers, basically we offer access to immigrants, Latino immigrants and newcomers and Latinos that are already established in the Pittsburgh area to access to services that are needed, also to access to education. We provide bilingual services. We also provide mental health. We have ongoing mental health programs running in Casa San Jose. Also offer access to pediatric services, and basically that's what we do. We try to connect and facilitate people who doesn't have difficulty accessing to services and navigating living in Pittsburgh to try to acclimatize to living in the United States. That's like our ultimate goal. Our ultimate goal is to try to offer help and give access to the Latino population in Pittsburgh to become self-sufficient.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, so I think I read something here in the chat. Okay, let me see. I have to go back. So whoever had a question that I'm trying to look into, someone said that they were having difficulty trying to formulate a question. So can you repeat that again?
Sebastian, she said she wants to know who can we blame if it's fair to put it that way for coming up with the term Latinx, who's responsible for that term? And also, given what we just learned, would it be rude not to accept using that term to describe someone?
Let me think about it. I don't think that is a matter of blaming anyone.
Who's responsible for the term?
I wouldn't know. In my research, it wouldn't say who started it or how it started it. It's just something that started coming up in conversations, and I think it was something that it was trying to, it's a term that it was trying to denote inclusivity in the Latino Hispanic community, and it's clear by the statistics that is used by a specific group. And we have to be careful about saying this, but it's not I mean, if we had to put the blame, it will be on them. But I don't think that they do it in a way that is not mean-spirited. That's my point, you know? It's not mean-spirited. It's trying to be inclusive. It's trying to be trying to foment inclusivity and acceptance. So blaming someone for doing that, I don't think that's
Yeah, I think she was looking for the word responsible, like who's the person who or where did the term originate? Not so much blame. I guess blame was the wrong word. More of like where did it originate? Who's responsible for bringing that into the who's responsible for bringing it into mainstream?
Yeah, I wouldn't know. I didn't find anyone to point out to say, oh, this person started it or this organization started it. No, it's just something that started happening apparently, you know,
Right.
and which is mostly identified with a group of people, not the totality of the Latino Hispanic community in the United States. The second part of the question is, what I was talking about, would it be rude to not accept using the term to describe someone? Well, that depends on, you know, you have to know your crowd, okay? You have to, because if not, Latinx is still something that we still see around, that is still used around. I don't think that it's going to go away necessarily, probably will fade away eventually. So is it rude? I mean, if it is sound rude to someone while you use it, you have to be ready to accept it for how it's taken by the other person and try to have a conversation about it. You know, try to educate the person or be educated at the same time. Okay, so I don't think it's rude. I don't think it's rude. Any other questions?
We have another person asking, what term would you suggest using?
Latine.
Latine?
That's the one that I use. Yeah, that's the one that I use.
Right.
Now, you
Okay.
know, and it's
So
because,
instead of,
right,
go ahead.
sorry. It is because it makes more sense for us. It makes more sense for us, Spanish speaking people, you know,
Right.
because Latinx, it sounds awkward, you know, it's problematic in itself. So Latine will be the one that I use. But, you know, again, this is my personal opinion. You know, any other questions? Can I spell that? Latine. There you go. Yes, the E at the end. It's because it's the one that it makes more sense on the Spanish language.
And can you use that plurally as well?
You can use it plurally as well, Latines. Any other question? Okay. Good question. What if the person is from Spain? I think it will be Hispanic, more appropriately, you know, because if we're talking about Latin Americans, it's for Latin America, not necessarily someone from Spain, which is European. So for an Spaniard, it will be Hispanic, proper. Any other question? No? Okay.
All right, thank you so much again. I appreciate the information and the dialogue we had going with the questions. And I thank you again for participating while on vacation. With that, I will turn it over to Carrie.
Thank you. I'm Carrie Gagliano. I am the intake supervisor in the Pittsburgh Regional Office of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. And to close, first of all, thank you to the committee. Really wonderful presentation, and you all have been working so hard not just this month, but all year. And thank you to Representative Kinkead and to Sebastian Garetto for all of your words today. Next up, to close out our day today, we're going to hear from Lyle Wood. He's the Regional Director of the Pittsburgh Regional Office of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, where he directs the enforcement of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. The office, and there's Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, and Philadelphia offices, and we investigate discrimination complaints in the areas of employment, education, housing, commercial property, and public accommodation. Before coming to the commission, Lyle was a general manager in the property management division of a builder developer, Crossgates Incorporated. Before that, as his 4 years at Crossgates, Lyle also worked as a senior housing counselor at the Urban League of Greater Pittsburgh's County Housing Counseling Unit, assigned to comprehensive housing counseling issues, and conducted default delinquent mortgage counseling for 8 years. This certainly has come in handy, as Lyle has worked at the commission since 1989, January 19th to be exact, where he started out as an investigator, and he investigated housing-related discrimination complaints. He then became an investigative supervisor, where he not only supervised housing, but also all the other areas within the commission's jurisdiction. He has served as the Pittsburgh Regional Director since July 2016. He also served as board chairperson of the Rosedale Block Cluster, which is a neighborhood nonprofit organization. He's active at Holy Cross Episcopal Church, serving as the acolyte director, a Eucharistic minister, and vestry member. And these were new to me, and so those of us in the Pittsburgh office may need to watch out. He is also a first-degree black belt in the School of Young Do, a certified scuba diver, which might be a fun field trip outing for the staff, and a certified master gardener, where he could probably join our very own Jenny Stallnaker, who also enjoys that. Lyle lives in the East End of Pittsburgh with his family, Lisa, Nina, and Trevor. So I will turn it over now to you, Lyle.
Okay, thank you very much, Carrie, and good afternoon to everyone. I really, and happy Friday. I'm really pleased to be here today for any number of reasons. When initially Jenny had asked me to do this, of course, I said, sure, let me be prepared and have all kinds of wonderful statistics and charts and things to be able to convey to people. And I really kind of had that together until last evening when I watched the January 6th, commission's first session. And I think that I became, I don't want to say traumatized, I became extraordinarily concerned all over again from that time. We are living in extraordinary times. I have lived through extraordinary times. I'm probably a lot older than most people here, and I can remember growing up going through different touch points, almost historical touch points in history. I can remember the early civil rights, marches. I can remember my parents and family members participating in those marches. I can remember the March on Washington. I can remember Malcolm X and the assassination of Malcolm X. I can remember the 60s because I grew up. I can remember the riots that took place and that the riots in many instances are the voice of the dispossessed and the voice of people who have no voice within the society. And I can remember something that really didn't kind of resonate with me at that point in time. This would be about 1969, when I was a 16-year-old who was thinking more about muscle cars and football camp and all kind. And the next party we were kind of go to more than anything else, especially in the summertime. But in 1969, one of the things besides of course, the Vietnam War, which was raging, and a lot of us, even at 16, were concerned about what our future was going to be if the government continued to go down that path. And of course, we were all concerned about civil rights, social justice, and how the atmosphere had been changing with regards to how people just treat one another and afford each other basic humanity and courtesy. and an event that took place that didn't resonate with me until maybe later in life, and that would be a place I used to, at least during spring break or in the summer, always go. I had family and it lived in New York, and particularly in Harlem. And I know that from time to time they would take me through. We go to Greenwich Village. We go to some of the restaurants, some of the clubs there. And little did I know at that time that probably one of the more seminal events in terms of LGBTQ and our own consciousness on how we look at one another and treat one another it's called many things. It's called the Stonewall Riot. It's called the Stonewall Uprising. And I tend not to like to use those terms. I like to talk about the Stonewall protests, where individuals just refuse to be treated less than any other citizen, not going to be treated as a second-class citizen, not going to be subjected to the type of treatment they're receiving just because of their orientation. And that was something that was astounding. You had, like I said, the civil rights movement, you had the riots, you had the assassination of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And I remember being a native Pittsburgher, the riots they had in Pittsburgh. I can remember seeing, as you try to travel through, National Guard Jeeps with 50 caliber machine guns on them, blocking off access to neighborhoods, and how things were changing, how we were going through an extraordinarily violent period of time, extraordinarily time that was a lot of upheaval, a lot of thoughts, a lot of new types of ideas that were taking place, and we didn't give much thought about it. Then as time went on and people became aware of the humanity of all people, regardless of orientation, regardless of your protected class, it became more and more important. I kind of grew up with that, especially in the household that I came from. We grew up with that. And as I progressed through my career, as it turned out, and it's kind of strange, the very first job I ever had at 13 was actually registering people to vote for the NAACP. Which kind of gave me a unique perspective on how everyone, again, regardless of orientation, regardless of protected class, should be treated and with respect and dignity and humanity and equality. And that's one of the things that led me ultimately, I think I was probably on some kind of, seemed like a preordained projection to end up at the Human Relations Commission. We do a lot of different types of things at the commission, but primarily we enforce the civil rights of individuals who have been victims of discrimination. We are probably the preeminent civil rights enforcers in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. If an individual believes that they have been discriminated against as a result of their protected class, and when we talk about protected class, we're talking about individuals because of their race, their gender, their ancestry, their national origin, their age, their ability or disability, their familial status if for families who have children under 18, their religion, their use of a supporter or guide animal, or their GED status, and that harm or that alleged act of discrimination has taken place within 180 days, and they are otherwise jurisdictional, we will take that complaint and we will investigate that complaint. And if we find that there is probable cause, that more likely than not, an act of discrimination and violation of the Human Relations Act took place, we will prosecute those cases. And again, there are remedy for different types of discriminatory conduct and harm. People have to be held accountable for their actions. And when people, and in my experience, I've been with the commission for 33 years, as I said, as an investigator, as a supervisor, and most recently as the regional director. I don't see any let up and some of the actions that people perpetrate. For whatever reason, people still discriminate against other individuals that they view and look at as the other, okay? That they are less than, that they are superior to. And as a result of that, their conduct is such that it causes harm. They discriminate against individuals. and it goes beyond prejudice. It enters into a power dynamic where sometimes people do stuff because they can. People a lot of times know what the law states with regards to how we are to treat one another and how we are not to exclude or discriminate against individuals because of their protected class. And one of the reasons why I mentioned started off mentioning the Stonewall protest is that over the years, one thing I have seen is the assertion of individuals, LGBTQ individuals, of their rights as citizens of this Commonwealth, citizens of this country. Again, we are not going to be treated like second-class citizens. We are not going to be treated less. We are not going to be the other who is essentially denigrated and disrespected. And I think, and sometimes it's frustrating because we have an ability at the commission to address a lot of these issues. And I think back, and this has probably strengthened my resolve in a lot of ways, to back in probably the winter, probably back in January. You know, COVID did a lot of things. And one of the things it did was separate us because of the nature of the virus. And particularly in our office, we were in a situation where we weren't all together in the office as our PHRC family. We were separated. We did an awful lot of things virtually. So we relied on one another just in terms of just information and informing people of things. And one of the things that I saw was an article about a transsexual female who was looking for a rental unit, an apartment, a place to live. You know, I do a lot. Most of the work I've done is in housing oriented, and sometimes housing is even more wrenching. And the types of things that happen in housing are more wrenching than they would be ordinarily. And this individual asked a simple question: will I be safe in this neighborhood? Okay, because there's been any number of assaults, any number of homicides of individuals who identify as transsexual. And the landlord or property provider looked at her and just said, oh, I don't think this unit's available anymore. Okay, it was available 5 minutes ago. Why is it not available now? And I remember the frustration that I had in trying to be able to reach out to be able to say, hey, there is an alternative for you. There is a way for you to adjudicate this travesty that just happened to you. And the one thing I look at, and I thank Jenny and for being able to set this up. I think this is great. I just don't want this to be a touchstone and that's it. You know, I want this to be a situation where we can begin to form a really strong partnership and relationship where, you know, if there are individuals that are being discriminated against and harmed, that we can try to address it and potentially be able to maybe find that individual some justice and in terms of the incidents that took place. And so what I'm going to do, I think, to try to give you to wrap up. The one thing my staff will know is that brevity is not one of my gifts. I will roll on this because I feel very passionate about this and I've been doing this for a long time. But I want to be able to form those partnerships. I want the individuals here to be able to join with us and to be able to provide us with any kind of instances that you know of any discriminatory conduct or any lack of social justice that's there. One thing that I'll do, since I have another few seconds to promote this, is that we will be having our annual meeting, commission annual meeting, and this month it'll be at the Community College of Allegheny County, North Shore. Used to be North Side when I was growing up, North Shore now, and we'll be having our public session after our executive session, compliance sessions. And I believe that'll be later in the afternoon. We'll be able to blast out some of that information to everybody. Please come and express your concerns. Like I said, I do not want this to have, oh, this was a nice conversation we have. No, I want this to begin the beginning of a really good relationship where we can partner together to try to address some of these issues of social inequity and injustice. So I just want to thank everybody for bearing with me. And I want to thank everyone for participating and wish everyone a wonderful, safe weekend. And I hope to see you soon. I hope we will continue this conversation.
Lyle, thank you so much. I appreciate all of your support. Thank you to everyone in attendance and to our outstanding presenters. A huge shout out to Derek Testa, who is tabling outside of our building right now with the Central Outreach Medical Bus. I hope to see everyone at the commission meeting at CCAC on the 27th, and there will be additional PHRC staff trainings coming up in the following weeks. Please follow us on social media for more information about PHRC events. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.